The CEO had spent 30 years building a company where one mistake could cost millions, but nothing prepared him for what he saw that night. Standing beneath the crystal chandeliers of his daughter's engagement gala, surrounded by investors, celebrities, and the most powerful people in the city, he suddenly noticed his daughter holding hands with a man he had never seen before. The man was not wearing an expensive tuxedo. He was not part of the billionaire circle. He was a tired-looking single father in a modest suit, standing beside a little boy who clung nervously to his hand. The CEO's face hardened as the entire room seemed to fall silent around him. He walked toward them, his eyes fixed on the stranger, and before anyone could understand what was happening, he raised his voice and demanded to know exactly who this man was. Before we uncover what happened next, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that remind us there is still goodness in the world. The man standing beside the CEO's daughter was named Daniel Carter, a 38-year-old widowed father who had spent the last 6 years rebuilding his life after losing his wife to a sudden illness. He had never imagined himself standing in a grand mansion surrounded by people wearing watches worth more than his house. His world was much smaller. It was his 8-year-old son, Noah, a tiny apartment across town, early mornings at a delivery company, unpaid bills, school lunches, and the constant fear that one unexpected expense could destroy everything he had worked so hard to protect. Daniel had never asked anyone for sympathy. He simply woke up every morning, went to work, came home exhausted, helped Noah with his homework, cooked dinner, and tried to make his son believe that life could still be beautiful after losing his mother. The CEO's daughter, Emily Harrison, had met Daniel by accident months earlier. One rainy afternoon, she had stopped outside a small neighborhood bakery when she saw Noah sitting alone on a bench, crying because he had lost a small wooden toy his mother had given him before she died. Emily could have walked past him, as hundreds of wealthy people often did when they were in a hurry, but she stopped. She helped him search through the rain until they found the toy beneath a parked car. Daniel arrived moments later, embarrassed and grateful, and that simple moment became the beginning of a friendship neither of them expected. Over time, Emily discovered something she had never found in the wealthy men her father introduced her to. Daniel did not care about her family name, her designer clothes, or her father's company. He cared about whether she was happy. He listened when she spoke. He remembered small things. Most importantly, he treated Noah with the same patience and tenderness he showed everyone else. Emily had been terrified of telling her father. She knew exactly how he would react. Richard Harrison was a self-made CEO who had built Harrison Global from a tiny office into one of the most powerful companies in the country. He believed in discipline, reputation, strategy, and protecting his family at all costs. To him, marriage was not only about love, it was about stability, compatibility, and a future that could survive pressure. Daniel, in his eyes, represented everything that could threaten that carefully constructed world. A widower. A single father. A man without wealth or connections. Someone who could never give Emily the lifestyle she had grown up with. So Emily waited, hoping she could eventually find the courage to tell him herself. But that night, fate made the decision for her. Richard had entered the ballroom expecting to announce Emily's engagement to the son of one of his closest business partners. Instead, he found his daughter standing beside Daniel, their hands intertwined, while Noah stood between them holding a small gift wrapped in blue paper. The room watched Richard's expression change from confusion to disbelief and then to anger. Investors stopped talking. Guests turned toward them. Emily stepped forward, prepared to defend Daniel, but before she could explain, Richard noticed Noah staring at him with frightened eyes. The little boy instinctively moved closer to his father, and something about that small movement caught Richard off guard. Still, anger controlled him. He demanded to know why Daniel was there and what he wanted from his daughter. Daniel did not defend himself with wealth or pride. He simply explained that he loved Emily, but he had never asked her for money, influence, or anything connected to her family. He only wanted a chance to build an honest life with her. Richard looked at him and saw a man who had entered his world without having anything to offer except sincerity. To Richard, that was not enough. Then Noah stepped forward. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing he had made at school. On it was a picture of himself, his father, and Emily standing beneath a bright yellow sun. At the top, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "My new family." The room became painfully quiet. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Daniel looked down, overwhelmed, because he had never asked Noah to call Emily family. The boy had simply decided it in his innocent heart. Richard stared at the drawing for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of tearing it apart or ordering Daniel to leave, he asked to see the picture again. His hands trembled slightly as he held it. For the first time that evening, the powerful CEO was no longer looking at Daniel as a poor man standing beside his daughter. He was looking at him as a father. Richard had forgotten what it meant to be one. Years earlier, before the company became successful, Richard had been a struggling young father himself. He had worked 12-hour shifts, slept in a tiny apartment, and once had to choose between paying a medical bill and buying groceries. He remembered the shame of having almost nothing. He remembered promising his own wife that one day their daughter would never experience the hardship they had known. But somewhere along the way, his promise to protect Emily had turned into a desire to control every part of her life. He looked at Daniel and realized the man standing before him had been living the same struggle Richard once knew. The difference was that Daniel had endured it without abandoning his responsibilities. He had raised his son alone. He had worked every day. He had kept going even after losing the woman he loved. And despite everything, he had never allowed bitterness to turn him into a cruel person. Then Richard did something that stunned everyone in the ballroom. He walked toward Daniel, extended his hand, and offered him a place at the table beside him. Guests watched in disbelief as the CEO who had once looked down on the single father now treated him with respect. But Richard was not finished. He announced that the company would be launching a new employee support program for single parents, inspired by what he had witnessed that night. He said that success meant nothing if a company could not help ordinary families survive the hardest seasons of their lives. Daniel was overwhelmed. He did not want charity, and Richard understood that. Instead, he offered Daniel a legitimate management position in a division that needed someone with his work ethic and experience. It was not a gift. It was an opportunity. Daniel accepted only after making it clear that he intended to earn every opportunity himself. Months passed, and the impossible began to happen. Daniel proved himself through hard work, eventually becoming one of the most respected people in the company. Emily discovered that her father was changing too. Richard began spending time with Noah, attending his school events and listening to his stories. The little boy who had once been afraid of the CEO eventually began running toward him whenever he visited. And every time Richard saw Noah smile, he remembered the drawing that had changed everything. A year later, the family gathered again beneath the same crystal chandeliers. This time there was no business deal, no arranged engagement, and no judgment. There was only celebration. Emily walked down the staircase toward Daniel, while Noah stood beside Richard holding a small ring box. Richard looked at the two people who had taught him the greatest lesson of his life. Sometimes the person you think is beneath you is actually the person who reminds you what it means to be human. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch silently. Like the video, share it with someone who believes that kindness can change lives, and subscribe to Bright Heart for more emotional stories about love, family, courage, and second chances. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment, "Love sees the heart," below if you believe people should be judged by their character, not by their money or social status. Richard never forgot the night he caught his daughter holding hands with a single dad. He had entered that ballroom believing he was protecting his daughter from the wrong man. He left understanding that the man he almost rejected was the very person who had helped his daughter find happiness. And perhaps the greatest lesson was not that Daniel earned the CEO's approval, but that Richard finally learned something money had never taught him. A person's worth is not measured by what they own, but by what they are willing to give when life gives them nothing.